at the moment he's an artist in residence at the Northeastern University in Boston. Harmen Liemburg studied at the prestigious Rietveld Academy in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And before that, he was a first-year student at the art school in Utrecht, where I'm from. But more importantly, he studied cartography. During his Rietveld period, he met artist Kees Maas, who was setting up his silkscreen studio in the art school, and very soon it became Harmen's favorite spot to be. His work at first glance is old school, with a real craftsmanship for printing. Although the impression of the work seems cheerful and light, most of its ideas are related to historical sources, and his print work still reads like a discovery map, revealing his first studies and interest. From 1999 until 2002, the Golden Masters, a collaboration with Richard Niessen, created an interesting series of work filled with influences from psychedelic 70s pop, influences from the American, Japanese and Arabic vernacular, richer and way more playful in form than was the norm in the Netherlands being usually sober Dutch design concept. Today he's working solo or together with a broad range of other artists, architects and fashion designers. Harmen received a BFA from the Rietveld Academy in Graphic Design and an MFA in Social Geography, Cartography from the University in Utrecht. He constantly produces self-generated projects and works with a range of clients. His work has been included in exhibitions in Europe, the United States and Asia, and his most recent project was a graphic installation based on the historical collection du Taillis at the International Poster and Graphic Arts Festival of Chaumont in France. It's a pleasure to introduce Harmen Liemburg.
Thank you, Henry. Is this thing working?
Yes.
Okay, good. Since I became interested in graphic design, my attention was drawn towards printers who became designers and designers who became printers. This, for example, is Hendrik Werkman. We're talking about 1930s, 1940s here, who had a printing company, but slowly developed a way to be creative with the type he used in his workshop. And another one is Frans de Jong. He's a very old man now, alive in Amsterdam, who liked to work with small book printing press to make very poetical images that he calls himself painting with the printing press. Another guy is Emil Putman, somebody who did a lot of different trades, and he's the founder of a group of small printers in Amsterdam, hobby printers. And he's one of my favorites because I think his work is a little beyond what the others do, and his work is more about patterns, rhythms. And what I really, really liked is the season's greetings he's producing on his little book printing press. And this type of work would be sent to friends and relatives and maybe clients. So this, before I started to print myself, this was a real inspiration. Somebody else, Otto Treumann, he didn't really print himself, but he knew so much about printing that he could really level with offset printers, and he didn't leave any opportunity to be involved in the printing process and have influence. And the pictures you see here are taken from a book by Irma Bohm, in which she, by zooming in on the tiniest of details, he made a lot of stamps, for example, you can really get into the printed matter. Someone you probably know, Karel Martens, famous for his book designs. and for being one of the leaders of the werkplaats typography in Arnhem. These pictures are taken from his big oeuvre book. The thing I like the most about his work are the little printing experiments he does with little metal parts, also book printing, overlapping inks. It's very playful, it's very open, it doesn't really have a clear message. It's not really conceptual, but the core of the thing is enjoying ink and paper, fooling around with the equipment and just, you know, be open to whatever comes out of it. Someone really important to me is Bas Oud, also a pretty old guy. I seem to like a lot of old guys' work. Bas is still alive. He's working and living in Amsterdam, but due to his illness, he is not longer able to work anymore, which is really, really a pity. Bas used to work as an offset printer before he got involved in graphic design, and his work shows, because he really knows how to push the materials and the printing equipment. And I think one of the monuments, unfortunately not that many people know about because the imprint is so low, is a book he made for an artist initiative space in Amsterdam. Okay, so there's a few contemporary people who are also try to integrate the printing technique into their work. There's a show at what's the name of the museum again? MoCA, thank you. About the great masters of American comics, and there I saw some sketches of Chris Ware, and I've been fascinated by his work for a long time because his line quality is so extremely sharp. I always assumed that he's working in Illustrator, so it was kind of a revelation to me to see his sketches and to discover that he actually works in a very old-fashioned way, making sketches with non-repro blue and making the final lines with black ink, using a reprographic camera to scale it down and make the files for printing. And the way he's treating the color separations here to create, it's just regular CMYK. This is the stuff I look at because it's very inspiring to me, and it's a challenge to find out how it's been done technically. Martin Woodley, a guy from Zurich, also working in New York. I don't think he ever made a print himself, but I wouldn't know of anybody else who understands about working with color separation so well as he does. And what I really admire is that he is capable of letting the computer work for him. So while I'm still foolishly doing a lot of stuff in a manual way, it takes a lot of time, he is capable of getting into the system and have the software create all kinds of random effects. Another Swiss guy is Bastien Aubry, who is part of a larger collective. I'm sorry I didn't have the time to find the pictures, but he is pretty unique because he is making old-fashioned woodcut prints in a very nobody ever does that anymore in graphic design. So I look at a lot of book print and I think it's really inspiring, but despite the fact that there was a book printing machine at the Rietveld Academy, I never felt much attracted to working on the machine myself because, I don't know, it would take ages before one is able to make a print, and I was kind of disencouraged by it. And but this all changed when I met Kees Maas. Kees Maas, who worked as an artist formerly, came to the Rietveld to be the, what's the word in English? Silkscreen workshop assistant. And before that we only had people who didn't really want to help out the students, and very disencouraging. This all changed when Kees entered the Rietveld because he was so eager to share his love and his knowledge on the silkscreen technique. So as an effect of that, after an internship in New York during my final year at the Rietveld, 3 months of online stuff, screen work only, I was so fed up with the fact that you couldn't really touch it, you couldn't really smell it. I came back to Holland and I was so eager to get back to silkscreen printing. So I spent a whole year or a whole half year just doing experiments using patterns taken from previous made screen work, just to see what would happen if I would use a copier, you know, downsize it, combining shapes. And this resulted in more elaborate experiments with color separations using halftones. And the final product of this whole research was a series of posters that announced the graduation show of the Rietveld students that year. And these are only 2 of 9 variations. At this final graduation show at the Rietveld, I met Richard Niessen. He came to me and he said, well, I really like your print. Can we meet sometime? I said, okay. And it soon became clear that Richard was a very investigative and active guy. He wrote songs. He had his own band called the HTPs. That's Dutch for the how-to place. So that name kind of reveals his lust for research. And what I liked very much at the moment, he was doing a lousy job in some kind of paper store because he didn't really make a living as a designer, was the fact that he was so eager to produce and to publish his own stuff that, for example, this demo cassette was made of very modest laser printing with regular stickers you can buy in like stationery stores. This is a flyer for his band. And Richard likes to build stuff from graphic elements. So that had a very strong appeal to me and I thought, okay, well, it might be interesting to work together with this guy. Some more demos, posters that are... the content is playing around with song text. Seems a long time ago, cassettes, right? In this MP3 area. This stuff was all silkscreen printed. So that's where we started our little 2-man company called GM, or the Golden Masters. Kind of boastful, because we were going to change the world and show everybody how Dutch design also could be. We entered a new workspace. This is offset printing, by the way, layering gradations of silver and fluorescent pink. We sent out a lot of mailings to the world because we were so eager to spread the word and to show our skills and our enthusiasm. So this happened quite many times. Folding sheets, sticking address labels, stamps, etc. I think one of the most interesting, really interesting things we did together was a series of events called Jack. And the name Jack was inspired by, well, everybody knows the regular, well, jacks you find on audio or video or other equipment. Because the goal of Jack was to, Richard and me were totally bored by the fact that designers only talk to graphic designers, musicians only hang out with musicians, etc., etc. That goes for architects, writers, and other groups. So we thought, okay, if we can come up with some kind of stage where all those groups can meet and exchange information about their working process, then we have a means to satisfy our own curiosity. We have a reason to contact all kinds of people we think are interesting. And we also have a vehicle to come up with, we have a reason to create our own graphic stuff. And hopefully we also have a good time. So we did everything ourselves. We thought of a program, we organized it, we were looking for sponsors, we did the design of everything, we did reproduction, publicity, well, you name it. It was a very, very interesting experiment. Of course, we also had posters put up in the city. Doesn't cease to excite me. Publish your own stuff out in the streets. I think the biggest event of all was a night in Paradiso. Some of you who visited Amsterdam probably know it. It's an old church, famous for its for a lot of legendary rock and pop concerts. But we worked our asses off all the time, and we didn't have that much fun anymore because it was way too much work, and we couldn't really afford assistance. One of the most satisfying projects we did together for clients, because this whole Jack period was non-profit. We were supported by a Dutch art foundation, but of course we also had to earn some money, and this is a set of stamps for the Dutch Postal Service. I won't really get into the details now, but it's like an ongoing series, a welfare project. On top of your regular postal fee, you pay some extra money, and that money is spent on welfare projects for children all over the world. And every year there's a specific theme. And this year the theme was child and computer, kind and computer. So that was really our cup of tea. Because we were able to combine our own interests as designers with a real serious client. And the stamp was inspired by old school computer games. And what you see here, it's like a little story starting in the upper left corner. The little guy literally jumps from one stamp to another, from clockwise. And finally he fulfills his task, becomes a little ninja, and puts the letter in the Buddha briefcase. It was a hell of a process, but very satisfying. It's fantastic to make your own stamps, of course. And use it yourself on little mailings. And clean, fresh stamps are nice, but actually the raw and dirty used stuff is much better because it adds extra graphics to the work. After a couple of years, Richard and me never really thought about the future because our collaboration started real spontaneous. But after a few years we kind of got sour a little bit and irritated and tired of each other. And then we discovered that we never really talked about our future plans, and we discovered that Richard had very different things in mind than me. And after a long and well, a bit painful process, I really felt like, you know, splitting up with the girlfriend, because our collaboration was so intense. We decided to go our separate ways again. And that's also the moment where, because the work I showed previously is a good illustration of the combination of our qualities, because Richard is very smart in building things from geometrical elements and have a more conceptual approach towards the printed matter, while I have a tendency to focus on little storylines, the illustrative aspects, and when we split up I decided to go back to my initial roots, or investigate more what those roots actually were. So let's go back to Kees Maas. This is, I'm kind of blessed to have met Kees because he didn't only learn me how to do silkscreen print, but after graduation at the Rietveld Academy, he also gave me the keys to his workshop and he said, okay, well I'm at the Rietveld, you can do whatever you want here as long as you don't destroy anything. And so all of a sudden I had my own printing workshop. So I could bring my own inks, my own paper, my own tools and use Kees's equipment. And because some people think that I have I use very fancy equipment, because they think the print is so good, I made some pictures to show you that the workshop is in fact very humble and basic. It's an old rotten table. There's nothing fancy about it. You know, there's a place to make to do montage, and of course we have a spot to clean the screens. But it couldn't be simpler actually. Yeah, well we could get rid of the vacuum table, but that would be a disaster. And the good thing about this workshop, it's called Interbellum, by the way. That's another word for between two wars, and that kind of reflects the spirit Kees is always in, because he's kind of a grumpy guy, pessimistic. Kees found a way to have artists with a painting and background, a drawing and a painting background, make color separation on a very specific material, and you can see it here on the right. So he invites artists he likes to do a special project for silkscreen printing, and what those artists do is they come to his workshop, they talk about the plan, and he has them paint with ink or whatever material on a very specific kind of foil with an irregular grain. And so when they're both satisfied, they do one print run and they might do another one at the spot, or the artist takes some film back to his own atelier and comes back some other time. So the print on the left, for example, that's 3 print runs, is slowly built up. There's some time in between, so there is time to grow and to digest the previous stage. And although I never had any formal training in painting or in drawing, for me this is an extremely inspiring environment, because it's all about ink and paper and layering material and experimenting with the following order of the prints. Kees is even able to do full color photographic reproduction, and I wouldn't dare, but it's really a miracle. So on a few of these prints you see these white areas. That's something you can only do with silkscreen print. There's no way of doing that in offset. So silkscreen print it can be very delicate, but it also can be very bold. It's just the way you treat it, just the way, depending on the way you mix the inks. And so since graduation I've been a regular there. I'm not printing every month, but if there's a reason. And that's also where I started to do, I showed you the stuff of Emil Poetman before, the little banners he sends for every new year to his friends. I started to do that too, because despite the fact that I couldn't live without email anymore, well, not in this modern society anyway, I very much like to send and receive physical objects. I think there's still so much joy in receiving a letter or a postcard that is handcrafted by somebody. And I started to do that too. And you know, by combining a couple of cards with different separations on one larger sheet of cardboard, it's not such a big effort. And the pleasure is huge. So let me show you some of the stuff that inspires me, because I had some education in art history, but not that much at the Rietveld. And despite the fact that I'm interested in art in general, my eye is always drawn towards the stuff that just surrounds us every day. So there might be interesting work in musea, but you know, the stuff that is on the road, literally, might be even more inspiring to me. So all the time I take little notes, visual notes. Like this is a German, what's the word in English? Transportation company. Or a guy I meet in the street with a beautiful gradation of blue. Don't you love it? Or a messenger coming to pick up a package in my studio. I totally admire this stuff, but I wouldn't. Personally, I'd rather, you know, dress in my simple t-shirt because my mind is already filled with this stuff. I don't need to. So, and sooner or later, all this material I gather will have its proper place in some piece of work. And for me, printing is not only about posters and books, but it's everywhere. I'm kind of obsessed. I can't help myself looking at it everywhere or recognizing or trying to find out how it was made. And I'm very interested in how the same shape can be rendered in different ways, like this license plate or the sticker, same image, different result. Or you might be aware that Dunkin' Donuts kind of changed the logo, which is really a pity because to me this is like almost like the perfect typographic logo because the letter shape is illustration and the way the typography has been done is the product, and I think that's the real quality. So to me this is one of the best logos ever. I also collect a lot of stuff other people regard as garbage, like stuff taken from the market. Or I go to my favorite record store in Amsterdam and I ask them for this kind of. This was done by an American, like the little window bills printer. If you want to go shopping with me, I think we'll spend a lot of time looking at this kind of stuff. I was kind of shocked to hear that you might not know this girl. Does anybody recognize her? Who is she? Yes. And she's hot. My favorite, this is one of my favorite shapes, the drop, because it's a symbol, but it could mean anything. Could be water, could be beer, could be vodka, orange juice, depending on the color, but also blood or piss or sweat, and I use it all the time. Despite my age, I'll be 40 this summer, I'm a sucker for cute stuff, and I'm not really like, what's his word, there's this Swiss designer with an obsession for Doraemon. Chalet, François Chalet, you might have seen the Swiss book Benzine. There's a picture of him in his workshop and he is like surrounded by cute dolls and fluffy toys. I got a few fluffy toys at home, I honestly admit. But somehow, I also look at girls and other stuff, but somehow when I come across this kind of characters, I just have to stop. This was across the street where I live, downtown Amsterdam. Somebody threw it away. Really weird stuff. I think he was dead. So that brings me to a little trip to Japan. When I started out with, thinking about graphic design or trying to learn the tools of the trade, I came across the work of some Japanese designers at a conference in The Hague. And at that time I thought posters were meant to have a message across in a very short time. Well, at least that's what I was always told that they should be doing. And then all of a sudden there was all this work from Japan I never saw before. And that really kind of shook me. And despite the fact that I had a lot of stuff to learn, I didn't have the tools to make any great or interesting stuff yet. It kind of, the waves of this mental earthquake, I'm still trying to digest the stuff that I discovered there. And through the work I learned that a lot of these Japanese designers are influenced by traditional technique like the Japanese woodblock print. And one of my favorites is Hokusai. This is a page from his Hokusai manga. And yes, that is the word where the contemporary manga is named after. But Hokusai was kind of a maniac himself because he was drawing all aspects of life and nature and social behavior in Japan. He was drawing all of the time. And he was so obsessed by making an inventory of everything that is around, the abundance of life, that he collected all of these species in special books. And slowly, I won't ever be a real expert, but I also fell in love with the Japanese woodblock print. This is work by a Canadian guy who's living in Tokyo and learned himself the tools of the trade. And what I like about it so much is it's very fragile, it's very subtle, it's very delicate. And by studying this type of work, I learn a lot, or I find a lot of inspiration I can use in my own tool, the silkscreen. But next to the classic woodcut print, I also very much like the Japanese kawaii culture, the culture of cuteness. And sometimes, oh, I did a bad job here cropping the pictures. Okay. What I like about it so much is that popular figures like Pokemon, the yellow guy, and Doraemon, the atomic robot, are really part of daily life in Japan. It's not only stuff for kids. Like in Europe, when you grow up, you're really supposed to get rid of all this childish stuff because you're an adult soon. Stop reading comics, stop playing with dolls. Be a grown-up person and start to read real books, have sex. But in Japan it's different. So this type of graphics you will find at your local grocery shop around the corner, neatly silkscreen printed by the way. Or when I took a trip to Hokkaido, the northernmost island in Japan, I found Hello Kitty on the right and Doraemon on the left, made from garbage taken from the beach, like little fishing boys. And I even found a guy on a very small island because there was a lot of this type of dolls all over the island. And I did a little tour on bicycle, and then there were a lot of them, and it appeared they were all made by this guy, a fisherman, who made those dolls for fun. Incredible stuff. I wish I could do a book on him and accompany him. Another interesting aspect of Japanese culture is the combination of old and new, like this girl in Shibuya, center downtown Tokyo, with a fantastic kimono pattern. And this is a mascot of a candy store all over Japan. And, oh, I forgot something here. There's also a chain of drugstores And the doll is the same everywhere, but the shop attendants dressed the dolls. So I'm taking pictures of all the variations of how those dolls are dressed. It's really fun. And I made a couple of friends in Japan through previous projects. And now and then they send me cute Hello Kitty stuff like this with little stickers and, you know, IDs I can steal to use in my own posters. Also, what I really, really love is Japanese packaging. And you might all have seen the books on, you know, the delicate wrapping in Zen style, you know, the neat packaging. That's all good and well. But what I like more is the stuff from the convenience store, candy. And it's like, it's a world at its own. So I'm studying ukiyo-e, the classic masters, but I'm also studying the way all this type of work has been made. Because it's equally important and dear and interesting to me. So, yeah, when you're walking through the woods, the Japanese vernacular, warnings to be careful with fire. So let's leave Japan for a while and go back to Europe. I realized some time ago that a main source of influence for me are comics, and I never really thought about it that way. But I think a lot of Dutch kids might know this series called Suske en Wiske. Does anybody recognize it? I think it was translated in English, right? Did anybody read it? It's too bad. The author is Willy van der Steen, a guy from Flanders, Antwerp. And I remember that there's a connection between my obsession for details and I realize I'm always busy making inventories of everything that's there. I try to be complete. And I remember as a kid that I already digested a lot of those titles, but there seemed to be an endless amount of numbers I hadn't read yet. So, and not only Suske en Wiske, but also, what's he called here? 1010? Always these lists of other stuff that should be read, you know, should be seen. And for me, it's still the same, actually. I'm always aware of the other stuff that needs to be seen, that needs to be done. So my sister and me also had a subscription to Donald Duck magazine. And in Dutch, the nephews of Donald Duck are called Kwek, Kwek en Kwak. That's because the Dutch, the way the duck, the sound of the duck in Dutch is called kwak. That's why. And I think the language of comics, suggesting movement in 2 dimensions, or action, or Uncle Oom Dagobert in Dutch. So the language of comics also influenced my work in a very strong way. So what I do is I collect a lot of stuff all the time. I keep it in boxes, and when there's a good reason, I can use those elements. Like, for example, this wedding invitation for one of my friends, using the faces from a Japanese product called Milky. It's a boy and a girl, pink and blue. It's mixing the cliches. And this used to be a logo of our main brand of condoms, because Richard was always talking about sex, so I thought it might make a nice combination. Here's our star of the show again. I used her for my own graduation invitation. Or other cute stuff used for stationery and self-promotion graphics. Postcard. I would be a fool not to use the computer. I use it all the time. It's my main tool. But sometimes I'm a bit tired of the perfect line. But I'm still kind of awkward about drawing myself. I can do it if it's for sketching, but if it has to be a serious product, I kind of back off. I don't really dare. But I found a way in between by making paper cuts, and that's what you're seeing here. So all this, we'll get to that later. So before I make a composition in Illustrator, I cut the shapes out of paper. How many colors do you think this print was made? Guess.
4.
Close.
3.
Yeah. And you've got inside information. What I like a lot about printing is that the fact that you, with very limited means, you can suggest there's an abundance of colors. Because this print was made with 3 colors, cyan, magenta, yellow, but very thin inks with fluorescent pigments. Oh, this is an old product. This is a kind of a side product to the children's stamp. A poster about a group of Rietveld Academy students going to Zurich and having a party and a football match. Or a poster I made to give as a present to my new Japanese friends while going to Japan for the first time. A present, actually. I moved to a new home in Amsterdam, so that's another reason to come up with a poster. Printed on black paper. Or after getting back from Japan, this is a variation on a drawing I did for Archetype. A totem pole of cute characters. Hello Kitty's 30th birthday, by the way, last year. I read a very interesting book on the topic by 2 American journalists who usually write for The Economist, serious guys. It was a very enjoyable book about the background of Sanrio Corporation. And I found out that he was inspired by a Hallmark company, you know, the postcard company. And he has this little gesture, big smile philosophy. And, well, there's enough stuff for a whole, for a separate lecture there, but it's fascinating literature. A poster it was some kind of a collaboration at a distance with Ed Veller. You might all know him. And we both share a love for the so-called American vernacular. And we both like to drive and take pictures and not make too many miles because we're distracted all the time. And who did the poster, by the way? A girl? I already understood, but is she here? No. Oh, that's too bad. I would have liked to meet her because I was kind of surprised that I'm so eager to, you know, get rid of the grit that my stuff was put in the grit again. But maybe I'll meet her some other time. Okay, let's go to France. When Richard and me split up and we didn't have our platform Jack anymore to satisfy our own curiosities and little investigations about the work of other people, I started to write about visual culture for a magazine called Items in Holland. And occasionally some other media as well. And I heard of my work had been part of a poster festival in Chaumont in France called the Chaumont International Festival International de l'Art Graphique et de l'Affiche. So I went there with my then girlfriend, a photographer. And what we did was make a kind of artist impression. We made pictures from the parts of the exhibition, different exhibitions we liked the most. And when we got back home, I added a layer of graphics inspired by the environment, like here the famous Michelin guy. And look at this very special edition. You know, you all know the tree that gives your car a better smell. But I don't know where I found it, but this girl smells bad. Whenever I open the box, I think, Jesus, ooh, what's this? And it's her. Or fooling around with the big ballpoint logo, student competition, or the international contest. And a real classic Roman Sislevich. So this was really something new to me, trying to look for new dimensions and new depth by combining photography and graphics in a very physical way. So that was an interesting experiment. And while we were there, looking at all the different venues, sorry about this following order, a few at Chaumont, a lovely village in the northeast of France. I was looking for a picture, it might come later. Let me tell you a little thing about the background of the festival in Chaumont. I think this year is the 16th or the 17th edition. Somewhere in the 80s, somebody discovered in a faraway archive a huge amount of posters rotting away somewhere in the dust. And that appeared to be a private collection brought together by a guy named, oh, here he is, good, Gustave Dutheilly. And Gustave Dutheilly lived in the fin de siècle, so that's the period of time around 1900. He was a journalist and a politician, and in French, affichomaniac. He was totally obsessed with posters and other printed materials like magazines, newspapers, and what we now call the ephemeral. So that means like invitations to parties, little commercial prints, stuff like that. And all these little ephemeral things were bound together and collected in thick albums. And here's some example. I saw in that specific exhibition, meticulously print in gold and very bright colors. That's all. That's pre-modern offset technique, right? It's lithography, printed with stones. And when I came across this material, I'd never heard of it before. I thought, Jesus Christ, this is such an opportunity. This is such a rich source of information and material. And I got into it a little bit more, and I found out that the festival directors. Oh yeah, let me tell one more thing. When they discovered all this stuff, they asked the guy of the director of the Museum of Publicity in Paris, what should we do with this material? And he said, let's organize a festival and add modern graphics to this collection and let's try to create a place that will be kind of a center for graphic design and related topics inside France. So that's what happened, and somewhere in the 80s that's where the first festival was being organized. So every year they try to show a little bit of this huge collection. We're talking about 5,000 posters and a lot of other stuff. And the year I visited France was the first time they tried to do something more, trying to combine the historical material with modern posters collected during the last editions of the festival. And here's a picture of how Paris must have looked like in the age of Gustave Dutheilly. So I made a proposal to the festival directors and said, I want to be like a guest curator, but I would like to make a choice from the collection, but also take another step. tried to create a new body of work using elements from all those posters. And, well, fortunately they said yes. They thought maybe it's interesting. So I studied this fin de siècle a little bit and found out that it was a very turbulent period of time. A lot of new technology, transportation, electricity, gaslight, but on the other hand, superstition, a very poor countryside, very bad hygiene. So it's a period of a lot of technological changes that have a strong influence on society, human behavior. We're talking about, for example, the start of tourism as we know it now for the richer people. But on the other hand, diabolism, a lot of, what's the word in English? Bijgeloof, superstition. And I thought the contrast between black and white from all different angles, that's going to be my theme. That's interesting because it also has a lot to do with printing and graphics. So black and white. I came across a lot of more or less Asian, Japanese, Chinese material. I was kind of in doubt, are those really Japanese artists or are they Europeans dressed up as artists? So I thought, okay, that's an interesting topic as well. And I studied a little bit. I remembered this book I bought once about Japonisme, so the influence of Japanese artwork on the French art scene at the end of the 19th century. And then all pieces of the puzzle fell together because there was such a strong influence through fine art artists to poster artists. If you look at composition, the themes, the way kimono patterns suddenly became popular to use. And again, this is such a rich source, such a rich area, worth spending an evening on. So there was a strong connection between the posters inside the collection and my own interest in France and my historical collection, and I tried to combine all those things. So what I did was take little samples from the material, like the legs of this girl, combined with the typography of France. And here you see it's kind of the logo of my show there. The letters being brought to life and kicking each other like cancan dancers in the Moulin Rouge. And this picture, I think I regard it as the icon of the traditional Japanese woodcut print. It's a work by Hokusai called The Great Wave. And if you look carefully, if you would turn yourself 180 degrees, you can see that the negative space in the air is a complete reverse to the wave. So it's yin-yang, pure sang. So I used all these elements for my invitation card, silkscreen print again. And in the same, when I was in France to do the selection of the material, because I went through all these 5,000 posters and made an initial selection of 500, I came across an exhibition in Paris on the San Francisco psychedelic pop and rock posters. And I discovered that there was a strong connection with Art Deco and this movement of Japanism in France. So it's really funny how all those things interconnect. So it wasn't that strange that my poster turned out to be some kind of a psychedelic experience, playing around with all those graphic elements. And the image was also used for a kind of welcoming banners inspired by Noren, Japanese phenomena, restaurants having little banners in front of their porch. The space I showed you before, where my exhibition should be, had 7 huge windows, heavily decorated, and I didn't really know what to do. Because it was the first time I did a project of this scale. So, first I started with making hundreds of paper cuts, taken from all those different posters, and find a way to combine it, to have separate themes for all these windows. So, a lot of work trying to create elements, building blocks to work from. And in addition to the stuff I took from the posters, I looked for other sources, like the Eiffel Tower in comparison to other high buildings, paper cut. Oh, an impression of the abundant theater life due to electricity and gas. This is kind of how it works for me. I collect a lot of stuff. I try to create, to incorporate it into my system. And once I have the idea there's enough elements, ingredients, I can start working, I can start combining, making collage, see what happens, how those elements work together. So that's how it works. An old poster, a photographic reproduction, a file on a CD, a Photoshop file, a laser print in black and white, a black paper, a knife, a paper cut, and then back to the scanner and into the vectors of Illustrator. And that's where I make the compositions for the windows. I never really know what I'm doing until I'm doing it. The work designs itself. You recognize the previous page. Oh, here he is. So that's how it works. Look at the little guy down in the lower corners. He is carrying the whole upside down Eiffel Tower. I thought this whole Eiffel Tower is such a symbol of machism, French machism. I'd like to turn it around and show its society is a delicate balance. Inspired by the superstition and by the posters of the so-called féerie theater shows, abundant theater shows. I made a devil's cave. So there are some more windows, but I think I wasn't so happy with all the results. So this is how it combined together. And the prints were made with inkjet technique on huge pieces of specially prepared cotton mounted on wooden frames. So the whole environment was also inspired by traditional Japanese interior design. I very much like the lightness and the fragility of the screens, the sliding screens. And again, in addition to the material I already had, I was looking for more stuff from the same period of time, like these vintage factory letterheads, who are meticulously printed in copper engraving. Fantastic quality. And the curator didn't allow me to make photocopies from the albums Dutheil made, but on one of the investigating trips I made some illegal photocopies. And these are taken from warehouses in Paris, fashion catalogs in a way. Very, very fragile thin paper, fantastic print. And I use those elements to make a collage, or different collage, to create another environment, because it's also an environment of the Industrial Revolution, mechanization, but also air pollution, the rise of the modern capitalism. So one of the collages, guys who act like factory executives, guiding their little workforce sheep through the jungle of factories. Another one is about children and women and money. So in addition to this, of course, if you really get into this Japanese interior design, it's wise to look at the woodblock prints. And I try to mix all those influences and interests together. So again, light and shadow. And the designs I showed you previously were made to make silk screens. Very delicate paper, imported from Japan, normally used to make the sliding doors. Very beautiful transparency and viscosity. And an extra run of those prints were cut up into like, kind of looked like dollar bills, little booklets. And the booklets were made to make this object that I regard as a mixture between a tree and an album. Everybody was invited to leaf through all the details in contrast to the actual collection, which nobody may touch. Okay, so far France. To finish this session off, some recent projects. After France, the projects in France, this summer I was invited to work for a Dutch fashion designer called Alexander van Slobbe. His man collection was extremely popular in Japan, but despite his commercial success, he decided to go back to his initial roots and make a smaller collection for women again. And he said, well, can't you do a couple of prints for me? Because I'm planning to do an evening dress, and I would like to have something elegant with waving lines and something tall. Well, how tall? Well, 1.5 meters. Okay. And so I made a vertical design, but surprisingly enough, he used it in a horizontal way. When I went to this show, I was really surprised to see that he had rotated my prints. But for me, this was a very exciting moment, because my final product had been treated by another designer as just one of the few ingredients to put together a total composition, which is his collection. So the way I work myself, you know, working with all kinds of people, using very different sources, collecting stuff until all the ingredients are right. Now all of a sudden my work was part of somebody else's collage, and well, a great experience, beautiful girls, champagne. I really got a taste for that, and I hope, and I pray there will be more projects like that. I think it's more exciting than, you know, designing house styles. So, this is a project that has been going on for quite a few years, because the process of building structures like this is so time consuming. It's a new building for the Dutch tax service in the east of Holland, and you can see it's a completely glass facade, so there's a lot of sunlight coming in. It will be hot as hell if nothing will be done about it. So the architects designed a physical structure from a special type of plastic that filters away part of the sunlight coming in the building. But of course, because our Earth is moving and, you know, our position towards the sun, the angle is different through the seasons. So in addition to this physical structure, there are areas on the glass facade where an additional print was needed to filter away more of the sunlight, and that's where they asked me. These are all pictures of the building that has been finished now. test prints. It's a special emulsion that can withstand ultraviolet light. This is kind of the effect you have looking from the inside to the outside. It's a graphic pattern, it's an abstraction of biological and technological cell structures. At the moment they're busy building the next one. It's an exact copy of the previous building. And they asked me to do another pattern. They wanted to have the same, but I said, well, Jesus, that's boring. Let's do a variation. And again, here I'm looking for the connection between the natural world and the technological world. I think there's a similarity between the work this little guy does underneath the bark of a tree and the stuff that's underneath the shell of our beautiful G5. So I created a bunch of creatures, and I solemnly swear this is my last project working with the grid, because I've been trying so hard to get rid of it, but I had to make a connection to the previous project, but I'll never touch it again after this. So I made a lot of beetles and other animals and little branches and leaves. So from the tile comes a large pattern, and like a forest in which there are empty spaces where the light can come through and other species might grow, I opened up this structure and had these weird plants grow. So they're producing it at the moment. Okay. So when Richard and me split up, we really had a hard time, both of us, to find a way to be self-secure and, find a way to design on our own, because we were grown together. And I'm happy to say we are still good friends, or again, I might add. And Richard got married this fall with Esther de Vries, also graphic designer, also Rietveld Academy. It's a small world. And they went on a honeymoon to China. So when they invited me to do their wedding invitation, I got back to my Chinese paper cut books and made this poster for them. This is the way it was sent through the mail, accompanied by chopsticks for their wedding dinner. And here you see Esther doing the actual mailing. Richard did a presentation a couple of weeks ago in Brussels, showing the whole process towards finding the right wedding dress, which was a hell of a job. I think Esther tried about 50 dresses, but no dress could satisfy her. So after a long and time-consuming process, they decided to design their own clothes. Here they go on their way to the, what's that called in English? The guy or the woman who is actually marrying you officially. No, not religious, but the governmental marriage. The judge? Oh, okay. We have like a municipal officer, or well, I don't know what the word is. You know what I mean. Richard even wrote a wedding song in which he expressed his love for Esther. And of course, Kees Maas made a nice sheet to give to all the guests. And, well, now it's a fact. They got married all right. Okay, to conclude this session, 1992, I finally graduated from Utrecht University, and I already knew there was no career for me in cartography. I came across some interesting aspects, but the people were so extremely boring, and I just couldn't see myself being a researcher in that field the rest of my life. But on the other hand, I had a few friends that were students at the art school in Utrecht. But there was really a grand canyon between me and the art world. It's hard to understand from my position now, but at the time I really felt that way. I was so relieved to finish my final thesis, and I threw away all my books at once without any hesitation, except one book, the book by Strehler and Strehler. Do we have more pictures? No. It's a book on physical geography, and it's I think I came 7 times to the, what's the word? To the test, to the final exam, before I got my my marks. So I studied the physical, the processes that shape our Earth many times. And like last week, when I'm watching down from my plane window and I look at the mountains, I think this is the Sierra Nevada, I'm not really sure. It's like I'm flying over this Strehler and Strehler book again, because all the diagrams come to life. And I find a kind of reappreciation for my academic education. I wanted to forget about it for a long time, because also in diagrams and serious graphics that are supposed to get the message across and not be poetical, poetry can be found. These are a couple of pictures taken from the famous Herbert Bayer 1953 atlas made for the Container Corporation of the Americas. And it's such a beautiful book, elaborately printed, composed with so much love, and pictures like this also might trigger one's imagination, like it does trigger mine. And I think that's it for today. So I wish you lots of ink and paper, and if you do it with love, nothing can go wrong. Thank you. Oh, I brought some physical stuff. If you have time, energy, interest, you can actually look at some of the prints.
Right. Harmen, thank you. Are there any questions in the audience? No questions?
Okay.
How long does it take you to make a print usually?
Printing or designing?
Designing.
Well, this is weird. I think, well, it depends. If you take this, for example, I'll take this off, okay?
Oh, no.
No?
We're still
sorry.
on the streamer.
Sorry. No.
Yeah. Do you want questions out of the audience, or do you want to do this in an informal way?
Yeah, that's maybe better. Yeah, it's less awkward, you know.
All right, guys, we're stopping the streaming. Bye. Good night.